Now, do you have audio now? John, do you have audio? Thank you very much. Technical problems occur. Let's just go back over this slide. March the 18th, it was signed into law, and the effective date of all provisions is April the 1st. There are two new paid leave programs, the paid sick leave and the paid family and medical leave, which is an extension of the Family and Medical Leave Act. Then the tax credits for paid leave, that's something that the employers are just chomping at the bit to know about, and we are trying to get some information on that. I have a little bit for you today that will help. And so the last thing that we'll talk about today is what's going on with unemployment, because there is a new law, an emergency law for that also. Okay, so there are two paid leave programs, and the employers are responsible for providing this. There's the emergency paid sick leave and emergency FMLA leave. The emergency paid sick leave is available to all employees, part-time and full-time, for reasons related to the coronavirus. And this is 2 weeks of paid sick leave. Full-time employees get 80 hours, which is 2 weeks, and part-time employees will be paid for the number of hours typically worked in 2 weeks. The reasons that qualify for sick leave include self-quarantine due to the coronavirus, or if they've been ordered to stay at home um, by the government in your state or city. That could be a reason. Obtaining their own personal diagnosis or care for the coronavirus exposure or symptoms. And then someone could be assisting a family member who's been diagnosed or who has symptoms and needs to obtain care. It also includes caring for a child whose school has been closed or the daycare has been closed and is not available due to the virus. The definition of family member is much broader here than it is in any law, including the FMLA. You'll see where they have parent, spouse, and child, and things that you would expect, but then there's next of kin, which we're not quite sure how they're going to determine that. If you're in somebody's will, I'm not sure, but also grandparent, grandchild, but only if the person is pregnant. Then they look at senior citizens, an individual with a disability, and a person with access or functional needs. So this is much broader than any other law on the books. Employees are entitled to their full regular rate of pay for up to 2 weeks if the leaves for their own illness, their coronavirus illness, and if they're caring for a child or family member, and that is under the age of 18, whose school is closed or the daycare is closed, their required pay is 2/3 of regular pay for up to 2 weeks. Now, this is employer paid sick leave. Just remember that. It's not something that's coming from the government straightforward that they sign up for. It is tied to your payroll. So what if you already have sick leave and you already provide sick leave? Well, this new leave is in addition to anything that you currently have existing. You cannot change your policy right now to avoid paying sick leave obligations, which means you can't, they can stack the leave and you can't change yours to offset the 2 weeks that they would be getting from this emergency leave. You can't require that employees use other paid time off, like vacation or personal days or other PTO, before using this new emergency paid leave. There is a notice of the new leave, and employers have to post this public notice informing employees of the rights that they have to this sick leave. The notice just came out yesterday, and it is available or should be available on our website at www.payentry.com/COVID-ID-19. There's a tab when you get to our website It's the first tab on the page. If you click on that, you'll find the posters there and other information that might be helpful. Emergency family and medical leave, an extension of FMLA. It does give someone 12 weeks of job protected leave, key in this piece of the legislation. This is job protected leave in this public health emergency. Emergency leave is available when the employee is unable to work because the school is closed or the daycare is closed. That's the only group of individuals that is qualified for this type of leave. So it has to do with someone not having childcare. The definition of family member here in this extension piece is broader than the FMLA rules, and it matches the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that we just looked at, which includes next of kin. So that should be quite the challenge if someone comes forward with that. But just remember that this emergency family and medical leave is only available to someone if they lose their child care or a school is closed. The first 10 days of this leave can be unpaid, and employees can use other forms of accrued paid leave, including the emergency paid sick leave benefit that they have available. But after the first 2 weeks, employers must pay workers at least 2/3 of their regular rate of pay. And remember, FMLA is not a paid leave, it's unpaid, not this FMLA. This piece of it that's and the emergency piece is job. You have to hold their job and you have to pay them for 2/3 of their regular rate of pay if they've worked for you for at least 30 days. And by the way, I am going to send each of you that are attending a copy of this PowerPoint webinar in PDF format so that you have this information for reference. The Department of Labor in this FMLA leave may exempt small businesses that have fewer than 50 employees, and employers can, with fewer than 25 employees, don't have to go along with or apply the job protection aspect of the bill regardless. But the process for applying for this exemption is under development by the Department of Labor. It should be available the first of the week of next week. Tax credits, this is what we're all looking for. Okay, if you have to pay this as the employer, where are you supposed to get the money for the tax credit? Well, a payroll tax credit, dollar for dollar, will be available to employers that provide this paid emergency sick leave or paid emergency FMLA leave from April the 2nd, and let me change that. It would be April the 1st because of the Department of Labor's change, would be April the 1st through December the 31st of 2020. This tax credit will be immediately available through reduced tax submissions, but the details are pending from the IRS. What appears that will happen is that it appears that you will offset what you would normally forward on your 940 with your 941. You would offset the amount that you've used to pay that sick leave or FMLA leave. You would offset it by not sending the money to the federal government, the taxes that you would normally submit. That should be available either tomorrow or the very first part of next week, the details on that. But it will be dollar for dollar as far as the tax credits go. Now, what are the tax credits? For paid emergency sick leave, employees that take leave for their own prevention care or treatment of coronavirus themselves, the tax credit is 100% of their wages up to $511 a day. That would be paid for 80 hours or 10 days. Employees taking leave to care for a family member, or if the school is closed or the daycare is closed, the tax credit is lower. It is 100% of wages, but it's up to $200 a day. For the paid emergency FMLA leave, the tax credit is 100% of wages up to $200 a day, and there is a maximum of $10,000 per employee. As far as the unemployment laws go and the benefits that are available to your employees, the unemployment laws, we know, vary by state. And so this act, from a federal standpoint, provides additional funding to the states to receive this special funding. The states have to modify their eligibility and access to unemployment compensation. And the three things that they need to do are waive work search requirements, waiting periods, and not holding employers chargeable for these claims. That's good news because there are going to be a lot of claims. I think 32 million people have filed for unemployment as of this morning. The states also have already put this into effect, so this will be available to your employees before April the 1st. Many states, as I mentioned, have already made the changes, and we have a posting on our website at the same website location that I mentioned before, payentry.com/COVID-19. We have each state listed, and we are updating those as we find out about the changes. If you want to go to your own state's unemployment website, they should have information there about the states that you operate in and how they are handling that. But for the most part, all states seem to be complying with the new rules. Things that we do know are that this legislation is complicated and that it's currently still being fine-tuned by legislation that the Congress is working on. So right now we're using current guidance, but we're prepared and need you to be prepared for additional rules that clarify the new law. As soon as we know something, we will let you know. And you're always you're always open to asking us questions. Send your questions to hrservices@payentry.com. I will answer those questions, and so will Jill Wilk, who is on our West Coast office in California. She and I run the HR Services division. I think because we have some time, I will answer some questions if you want to type them into the chat room. Let me just go back up here and start with the first question I've gotten. One question, what is the actual effective date? The actual effective date of this law is April the 1st. Another question, what if 2/3 of pay is less than minimum wage or 2/3 of salary is less than minimum annual? For benefit purposes, because these are not considered wages, that's fine. Because it is a benefit, it's not a wage. Another question, does this apply to nonprofit, profit, and tax-exempt entities? Yes. Part-time employees, I have a question, what about part-time employees? They are covered. Part-time unemployment employees can file for unemployment. They can file for this benefit, and they receive a reduced benefit as far as a tax credit, but they are eligible. Another question, does a company with below 10 employees have to request exemption from any of these mandates? As a standard, we are exempt because of our size. Those who have less than 50 employees can be exempt from the emergency FMLA leave, but you do have to request an exemption. And those exemption forms should be available on Monday of the coming week. But it applies to all employers right now. So how do we get the required posting to send to remote employees? If you can take it off of our website and email it to them. You can also go to the Department of Labor's website, which is dol.gov. You can find the poster there also. A good question here. What if an employee is already off work? They should be filing for unemployment. There are no retroactive benefits. So if they are no longer an employee of yours on April the 1st, then you would not be able to pay them a benefit. So they should file for unemployment. Another question, so if an employee's pay is more than the tax credit, the employer is just on the hook, correct? You don't have to pay them more than the tax credit if you don't have the funds or if you don't want to. But the tax credit is the only amount that you're going to be able to retrieve. So that is up to the company, whether or not they pay more than the tax credit or the tax credit itself. Remember, it's not wages, it's benefit. Here's a question. If someone is already laid off and gets sick, what happens? Well, they should have filed for unemployment, and that will continue throughout their sick time. Another question, if your employee has already taken a time off prior to the April 1st date, can you mandate that they use their current PTO? Definitely, because the benefits don't start until then. You can mandate that they take their PTO, their sick leave, their vacation, whatever, in order for them to have a paycheck. And I think they probably would want to do that. If we have to pay the employees for not working, then how do we encourage them to continue working? Well, it's not that you're just letting them go home. They have to have a reason for not working. Um, Unfortunately, there are a lot of areas in the country that have enacted a stay-at-home rule. If that is in effect, they can't come to work. So you do not have to pay them, but you do have to pay them the benefit if you can afford it. Is the benefit, if the benefit is not if you can't afford it, if you can't afford to pay them, you're not required to pay them unless you can afford it, because it is paid leave and the paid FMLA leave are part of this emergency act, and you would, if you can afford it, you have to do it. It's mandatory. Um, and then that second part of the question, how do we encourage them to continue working? Our entire team at Pay Entry and MPay have been working at home for 2 weeks, and we have had great success with it. If employees are engaged with your company, and that's something, we have some webinars coming up in April that will talk about how to keep people engaged and keep them working. Everyone has their deadlines and their responsibilities. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do while they're home, and you have set clear expectations, then that's grounds for disciplinary action. So they need to accomplish the same job that they would have at work if you're allowing them to work at home. Good question. Is stress a valid reason for the employee to stay at home? If someone feels that they are um, putting themselves in harm's way by coming to work, there would have to be, under the OSHA regulations, they can't just say they're afraid to come to work. There has to be something there that is making them so incredibly nervous about being there. But there are cases where this could be an OSHA claim, and generally it's stress is not, but in this situation, if they want to work from home, then I would allow that as an HR manager. Okay. Here's a question. If I take a full-time employee to part-time before April the 1st, what's the minimum number of hours to keep them part-time and still keep them as an employee? Well, it would be under the 30 hours. So less than 30 hours is generally what's acceptable right now for considering someone a full-time employee. And another question, can I take them from working 5 days to 2? Yes, you can. You can reduce hours. To cope with in financially what you're dealing with now as a company. Another question, if we're all working remotely, then it wouldn't apply, correct, since they're working. No, it still applies. If they, well, technically, if you're going to continue to pay them and they're all working remotely, it's just like us. We continue to be paid since we're still working full time, but we're just working from home. So yes, they would not be eligible for paid leave unless during this e-working or virtual environment we have right now, if they become sick and can't work, then you would pay them the sick leave or the FMLA leave. So they can still get a benefit if something happens while they're working remotely that keeps them from continuing to work. I think that answers the next question. If our staff are working from home and we're paying them, can they still apply for these benefits? Only if one of the qualifying rules or reasons for it applies. That is, that they have the virus themselves, they can't work because they have to take care of someone else, or they can't work because they have a child at home that is keeping them from working. A question for paid sick leave, can we ask for a doctor's note? You can. Um, the World Health Organization and a couple of the others are asking employers not to do that because of the workload of doctors right now. But I'm sure people get something when they go to the doctor, and they probably will get if they have the virus, they would get a quarantine note that they could share with you. Here is a question, if you have a business that's working because they're essential, they're still open, manufacturing cannot be done at home, do they have to show proof of not having to work? And can you ask if they've been tested? The first question is, do they have to show proof of not having to work? If they're filing for unemployment, the unemployment department's going to ask you if they're working or not. If they're getting the paid benefit from you, then you would know that. The benefits otherwise are not payable unless they're coming from you. So you would know whether they're working or not. The only situation would be unemployment would ask you if they are still working or not. And can you ask them if they've been tested? You cannot. Under some of the HIPAA rules and the ADA rules, you cannot ask them that. Actually only those who have shown symptoms are allowed to be tested. So what is the difference between the 2 paid leaves and unemployment compensation? The 2 paid leaves the first one lasts 2 weeks, the second one lasts 12 weeks, and unemployment is much longer. And each state has its length of time. I did hear that the federal government was going to modify it so that it's 4 months. Maybe longer than that, but their unemployment compensation is a percentage of their pay that will not be chargeable back to you. And what if they say they're too stressed to work from home? Then I think you have a problem. That's the question. What if they say they are too stressed to work from home? Well, then you need to put them on your leave of absence if you have some. If you have any paid leaves, they could use their vacation or they're sick. The stressed at home would not comply with OSHA regulations, to my knowledge. You may want to talk to your attorney about that, but I would say if they're too stressed to work from home, they need to be taking some time off, and whether that is paid or unpaid time off. That's up to the company. Another question, if child's out of school and both parents are home, then can both parents get paid to stay at home? Technically, yes. I haven't come across that question before, and that's very interesting, but I have not seen anything that would limit it to one parent. John has a question, we're a seasonal business. What's the date of record for employee count? It would be, most of the things that I've been seeing is in the last 6 months, but I think your current head count, excluding seasonal, would be fine. John, if you want to shoot me an email, we can talk about this more, and I might be able to get you some additional information on how seasonal employees should be treated. That's a very, very good question. Another question, if I only have one employee, am I exempt from the 12-week leave? You are not. It is all employers unless you file for an extension, which the forms for that should be available next week. And what if an employee comes in and says someone they know is getting tested? Well, that's hearsay, and you just need to put out some sort of communication and remind individuals that if they are do have symptoms, they need to let you know. And if you don't know, if they don't do that, it would be a violation of company policy because you've requested that, and you may be putting others at harm's way. So you can't go to the other person and say, "Are you getting tested?" You need to put out some kind of a communication that says not telling us would be a violation of our company policy at this point in time, and probably make sure you have a company policy about those kinds of things. And then let them know that, their job's not in jeopardy. They just need to let you know if they have symptoms. But it should be addressed to the population. What if the employee has an older child with an autoimmune disease but does not need supervision? If the child is over 18, they would not qualify for the leaves. Another question, how do you qualify a person is eligible to be off, i.e. caring for themselves or a family member? In this case, it is just going to be their word. You could have them write something down as an affidavit and keep it in their file, but it is their word that they need to do this. You cannot verify, or they don't know how you would verify. If someone's school is closed, that's public knowledge. If someone's daycare is closed, you could find that out online. Normally, those types of closings in today's world would be published, or they would have given the individual some sort of notice that they're closing effective on such a date. So get a copy of that. Okay, that seems to be all of our questions today. If you think of something else that comes across your mind, please just send me an email. It goes into a queue that Jill and I are constantly helping with, and we'll be answering your questions as we get them. Okay, to stay safe. We will have new webinars next week because there are new things coming out. We're going to probably be able to tell you more about the tax credits, so stay tuned and we will try to keep you posted. Please go to our website, www.payentry.com /COVID-19 to get answers to a lot more of your questions. Thanks for attending today and stay safe.